So first of all, I have to tell you, are you guys as impressed as I am with the quality of the presentations that we've had here today? I mean, it's just astonishing, and I'm just thrilled. I hope we can maintain the standard here. So thanks for being here. This whole notion about getting to the heart of employee engagement for us is kind of two-dimensional. It's what do we got to do to get down to the real core and the essence? We've been talking about employee engagement for 20 some odd years. People are still trying to figure out what the heck is that thing, how are we going to get to it? And then there's this other dimension of the heart. This whole human love, emotion thing. I love the way that's showing up in all of the presentations here because, as you will see, it's extremely important if we really want to optimize employee engagement. But let's be honest, people are tough. And how many people in this room would much rather have not to have to deal with all that crap about employees and just get on dealing with something else? Raise your hand. Well, okay, so your day is coming. I want you to know this is the most recent issue of Harvard Business Review. As you will see, it says, meet your new employee. And there's a fascinating story in there about how things are going to shift in terms of the workplace because of technology and the various kinds of innovations that are going to be taking place. But that seminar is going to happen later on. For right now, we do have to, quote unquote, deal with people, right? So, why in the world do we want to do this? You've probably seen this at least twice today, probably more than that. You've seen the Gallup data on the engagement indicators. They've been saying for at least 15 years we got 30% of the people engaged, 18% of them disengaged, or actively disengaged, which is costing over $500 billion a year. And you see what the cost is for individual, per employee. Why aren't we learning anything? Why in the world do we continue to go down this path? Well, this data was actually sort of interesting to me after the 15th year. Then in 2012, they came up with something that was very interesting. And if you're looking for a way to make impact, we talked earlier about, some people asked the question, how do we get to the executives? In 2012, Gallup did what they call a meta-study. They took the companies that finished in the top half of the engagement indicators, they compared them with the companies in the bottom half of the engagement indicators, and they correlated that with key performance indicators. The companies in the top half, you can see in the engaged organizations how much better they performed on these key performance indicators. Customer ratings, 10% higher. Profitability, 21% higher. Productivity, 20%. You can see the list. Now, if you take this to your boss, to the executives, and say, we really ought to think about investing in employee engagement initiatives, do you think this data might get their attention? I mean, consider that. In fact, as you're sitting here, pick one number, any number you want, and say, if we had a half of that kind of increase, would it be worth investing in employee engagement efforts, right? People finally get that, but then what do? They run to the latest program, the latest fad, the latest this, that, or the other thing. You know, I love it. What was the title of that book that Stephen wrote? Something about best practices. What was it? Stupid. Yeah, exactly. Best practices are stupid. I won't say they're stupid, but we do run to them too quickly. And then we get caught in this thing we call the program trap. And I'm going to illustrate the program trap to you. One of our colleagues, Roger Dupree, was working with a company and doing very well with some of these employee engagement initiatives. And one day he shows up, and across the front of the building is a big banner that says Commitment to Excellence. Roger says, my God, we're going down the path of the program trap. He walks into the meeting with the employees, and he talks with them, and he decides he's just going to ask them, what do you think of this sign out there? And nobody says anything. It's crickets in the room, right? Finally, this old curmudgeon has been around for about 110 years. You guys know those? You got them in your... Can you picture this person in your head in your organization? He stands up and he says, Roger, let me tell you, there are only two signs around here that mean anything. One is exit, and the other is wet paint, and everything else is a bunch of bullshit. I'm telling you, when you get caught in the program trap, that's exactly what employees think. They think it's a bunch of BS. So how do you make sure you avoid that program trap? Well, You don't rush to best practices. You don't rush to the how. You really start to understand the why before the how. And so here's some of the whys about human beings. First, let's understand what we mean by employee engagement. It's an emotional connection that employees feel for their organization and their work that gets them tuned in, turned on, and eager to go the extra mile. By the way, anybody who wants this PowerPoint, we will make it available so you don't have to scribble all of these notes. Extra mile shows up in a variety of different ways. Discretionary effort, loyalty to the company, retention, advocacy in the community, all of these things, okay? One thing that's critically important to understand, however, is that you cannot have extra mile without an emotional connection. People will show up, they will be responsible, they'll do their jobs, but you cannot get extra mile from just showing up every day. It takes an emotional connection. So what are the things that really allow you to make that kind of emotional connection? Well, first of all, why don't employees actually step up to the plate and take initiative? You've probably seen or heard these kinds of phrases from people in your organization, right? Every time I try to do this, I get in trouble, blah, 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 blah. So we know some of the reasons why people don't do it. Well, why do they do it? What are the extra effort drivers? Now, you're going to need either a really good memory, or you're going to need a piece of paper and a pen, because I want you to write down. This is actually a study that was conducted by a colleague of ours, Ken Kovac, at George Mason University, and he went out and talked to tens of thousands of employees in hundreds of different companies, and he asked them this question: what are the things that get you to go the extra mile? Not just show up, do your job, but going the extra mile. Then he asked the managers a different question. He said, I'm going to ask your employees what gets them to go the extra mile, put in that extra effort. What do you think they're going to tell them? Do you think those two things were the same? All right. So what I want you to do is write down the top 3 that the employees said would get them to go the extra mile, and then write down the top 3 that you think the manager said the employees would say. All right? So I'll give you just 30 seconds or so. Don't overthink it. Excuse me, flash. Excuse me, again. Okay, here we go. Ready? Number 1 thing for employees was interesting work. How many got that right? Good. Number 2, appreciation of work done. And number 3 was being in on information and decisions. Now, aren't those interesting? And think of the bless you again. Think of the emotional connection that these things have. What it's like to do interesting work when you're in the zone. I mean, it's just the most wonderful, exhilarating feeling to be there. Appreciation of work done, of course, that's going to be very positive. Being in on information and decisions, that surprises people. In fact, look what they rated it. The manager said that was last on the list. Who the hell needs to know anything, right? As long as they just do their job. Why do they need to be in on information and decisions? So that was number 1 for managers was what? Money. Number 2, job security. Number 3, chance to advance. The thing that's interesting here is the things the manager said would get employees most motivated to go the extra mile were the things that cost the organization the most. The other things cost very little. You just have to kind of shift the way you think about things and the way that you work with people. So, here's some other truths about people. They want to do a good job. Nobody shows up every day saying, I can't wait to get in there and screw up again. That is not who people are. They want to be on a winning team. We love the Cardinals. I don't even play baseball, but I love being on a winning team. I suppose that there are some people here who don't like the Cardinals winning all the time, but we like it. They want to be included and appreciated. They have the desire and the ability to improve. This is an innate thing. I really believe that we are stamped at conception with the desire to have today be better than yesterday and tomorrow to be better than today. That's a real powerful driver that we've got inside us. Resist force and uncertainty more than change. How many of us walk around and say, we can't do that around here because people resist what? Change. People resist. How many of you are wearing the same clothes you wore yesterday? Raise your hand. Now maybe you don't want to admit it. Eat the same thing, do the same things. I mean, we love variety. as long as we have some control over it and it's not being shoved down our throat. We hate it, and you'll find out why in a minute. And we certainly do not excel when we're treated like children, right? Here are some realities on the flip side. We view the world differently. We see things in a way that's quite different from one person to the other. We make mistakes, right? We mess up. We have a bad hair day. We certainly we didn't learn skills to manage conflict until we got out of school. When are we going to start doing this in kindergarten where we really need to do it? And then, of course, old habits are hard to break. New ones are hard to make. Those are the realities about people. We get to understand all of this stuff. We begin to see why people are the way they are and why we need to redesign the systems and the policies and the processes in order to make sure that we've got the right concepts fully embedded in the way that we do day-to-day operations. But here's the big why of human nature in the workplace. I was writing this book, getting to the part of employee engagement, and I was trying to figure out where do I want to start. It's a business fable. I wanted to really get at what are the essential differentiations between human beings and other living creatures, because I thought something in there was very important. And so the first thing that I determined is something that you will probably be able to do here. Now on the count of, I'm going to start off with a phrase, and then on the count of 3, I want you to all give me the answer at the same time, okay? So 3 as a 1, 2, 3.
Bird.
Everybody gets it, all right? Now what are birds free to do? Fly. What else?
Sing.
Pardon me?
Sing.
Sing?
Crap.
Crap. All over your car usually is what people say. Are birds really free to do that stuff, or are they programmed to do that stuff? They're programmed. They have no choice, none whatsoever. Now human beings have programs too, but we have the unique capacity to say, to hell with the program, I'm going to do something else. Now the other thing that's very important is that we have this capacity for imagination, to be able to conceive of things that do not exist in the natural world. That's why we are able to make the things that we're able to make, like computers and pencils and chairs and all of these other kinds of things. The thing that's really remarkable about imagination is that it and free will go hand in hand. In fact, imagination without free will has no power, and free will without imagination has no purpose whatsoever. The importance of that phrase is truly significant, because until we really get to understand that, to the extent that we fail to understand those driving forces of human beings in the workplace, we diminish their capacity to be human beings that contribute to their fullest to the organization's ability to differentiate. You heard that at lunch today. I mean, that's one way you can see that we are different than other animals. You've seen one robin, you've seen them all. You've seen one nest, you've seen them all. No robin says, you know, I want to move to the suburbs where it's going to be a lot nicer and we're going to be able to increase our standard of living. It's not the way animals think. We differentiate because of these factors. The only problem with this is powerful, must be satisfied, but what happens if you have too much imagination and free will? They put you away. Chaos, right? So, how do we deal with chaos in organizations? Of course, we want to have command and control. How many organizations do you work in, or how many employees really love command and control? Not much. And what does that lead to? Micromanagement. How many people like that? Not much. And what are the results of all of that? Well, people are more likely to do what they're told, right or wrong. They won't take initiative to use good judgment or offer ideas. They sometimes take pleasure in seeing things fail, right? Have we seen that before? And you drive away your best talent. Always drive away your best talent in command, control, and micromanagement. And this is actually something Mike pointed out one time. He says command and control and micromanagement are like business kryptonite. They sap the strength and undermine the potential for becoming a super organization. So, given all that, what do? Well, first of all, understand that it's not the control part people hate, it's the command part. Everybody likes to have control because it means predictability. Here's our little model for ensuring that we have this right balance. Now, it's a human rocket. And like real rockets, human beings need some kind of thruster and booster to get them into the space and into the stratosphere. For human beings, that is imagination and free will. Rockets also need stabilizers. For human beings, that's security and self-esteem. They also need a guidance system, make sure we're going where we want to go. That's responsibility and accountability. Now, all of that then aligned with mission control, the organization's basic structure and mechanism for making sure that we're staying on track. Now you have a mutually supportive, mutually controlling kind of operation, as opposed to something where you've got people dictating what has to be done to other people all the time. And you begin to have the foundation for trust, which we define as the belief that people will do the right thing in the right way at the right time. Pretty simple, elemental description. If they believe that, they're going to perform well. Now, one of the things that we're going to talk about is we want you to walk away from here being a champion of trust. And we're going to be able to, in fact, certify you at the end of this session if you're up for that. You up for being certified as a champion of trust? Okay. So I want you to write down one more thing. What do you believe? How much does the quality, these are 3 questions. This is on a scale of 1 to 10. How much does the quality of the relationships within your organization affect the quality of the relationships outside of your organization? Okay, let's just take that one first. Scale of 1 to 10. How much does the quality of your relationships inside affect the quality of the relationships outside? Okay, just write down a number. Write down a number. Then, how much is the quality of the relationships within your organization affected by the level of trust? Again, scale of 1 to 10, write that down. Then, how would your employees rate the level of trust within your organization if they were sure no one would find out? Okay? All right, let's do the first one. How many gave it a 10? Good. 9, 8, 7, 6. Nobody below a 7. All right, pretty typical. Next one. How much is the quality of your relationships affected by the level of trust? 10, 9, 8, 7. It's always higher. Now this one, last one. 10. What happened? 9, 8, 7. Okay. 6, 5, 4, 3. You get it, right? We know this, and yet we allow the systems and the processes and the way we do things to continue to undermine our capacity to build relationships with employees, trusting relationships that build trusting relationships with customers. The average we usually get after tabulating this stuff for years is 9.2 on the, or excuse me, 8.5 on the first one, 9.2 on the second one, 4.5 on the last. Here's where you got to start. Great book. Customer comes second. Get it? The customer comes second. Not because they're less important. Only when people know what it feels like to be first in someone else's eyes can they sincerely share that feeling with others. We're not saying choose your people over your customers. We're saying focus on your people first because of your customers. That way, everybody wins. Okay. Enough for the concept stuff. Let's talk about what it looks like in operation, okay? The trust connection, that's where it all has to start. And it begins with defining values and vision. And we do not mean going out, having a bunch of executives decide with a consultant what our 7 top value statements are going to be. You know what that looks like? It looks like pretty much everybody else's on everybody else's walls in every organization, right? What's critically important is to have well-defined, well-vetted statements, action statements about what represent values. Now, Mike actually worked with Arthur Anderson to come up with a tool that has 40 value statements on it right now, representing different culture types, everything from share a sense of purpose to punish failure to pay attention to hierarchy and status. And what we do is we have people first say what are the characteristics that are most like and least like our current culture, and then same value statements, what are the ones that are most like and least like our target culture. And everybody on the team does that different, does their own score sheet. So it's completely democratic. Now the power of that is you get to see what the gap is within 1/100th of a percentage point between where you are and where you want to be. That's the kind of information that will allow you to have a very powerful conversation about values. Where are we? Where do we want to be? What's the gap? Then you can begin building the vision on top of that. Then you start your goals and your strategies and your plans. What's important, though, is to make sure that you also consider the management credibility factors that are essential if you want to build trust in an organization. Number one, care and concern. Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Nobody. Honesty and openness, table stakes. No surprise there. Responsiveness. You can be open and honest and caring, but if you're not responding to employees, are they going to trust you? No. You can have all of those, but if you're not competent or you don't know how to surround yourself with the right kind of people and resources, technology to ensure that this operation is functioning competently, people aren't going to trust you. Reliability. Can I count on you to do what you say you're going to do? And last, apology and accountability. Managers are crappy at that. Why do you think that is? Why do you think they're so bad at it? Any idea?
They don't want to show vulnerability.
They don't want to show vulnerability. Absolutely, because if I show vulnerability, oh my God, they'll think I'm incompetent. The exact opposite is true. Every bit of research shows that when you can show that kind of vulnerability, to stand up and say, my bad, here's what I'm going to do to fix it, your credibility goes through the roof. Right? Now, that shouldn't surprise anybody, but here's where we mess up. We design our systems, processes, and our practices and our policies around outmoded notions. We go back to the same policies and processes and systems we've always used before. And in these key areas, measurement, rewards and recognition, communication, learning and development, and continuous improvement. We've got some alternatives. You get all that aligned just right. The vision and the values and the vision, the management credibility factors, and people first systems, policies, and processes, and you've got this engine that you need. You get the right mindset, you get the right heart set, and the right systems, policies, and processes to put those things into operation every single day. That gives you the trust you need to generate employee engagement, that leads to the deep customer relationships, that leads to success in the marketplace. Now, to keep this metaphor going a little longer, this is not rocket science, but it provides the kind of framework that you need in order to understand that we've got to work with the heart, we've got to have our head in the right place, and we've got to have the right kinds of systems and processes. We're going to talk a little bit about a couple of them. We don't have time to go through all of them, but we're going to talk about a couple that are pretty fundamental and elemental. But the key thing, again, we talked about the program track. You have to make sure that you have people first systems, policies, and processes if you do not want to get caught in the program track that has you doing one-off activities that are never going to be able to be sustained, and to produce the ongoing, consistent level of engagement that you really want in an organization. I mean, we've all seen programs that give us a blast of energy for what? A month, two, a year, and then it's gone. It's because it never becomes systemic. And that's the shift that has to be made. So let's talk about communication. This is our model for organizational communication. Effective, what we call real-life, real-time communication. And you can see the 7 main categories that we're going to be talking about. Let's talk about interaction first. How many of us use this outmoded notion that employees are an audience? I'm sorry, you aren't going to raise your hand when I ask a question like that. Employees are the organization. They are not an audience. How do we make sure that we engage them in a way that they truly are, being in on information and decisions and all of those other kinds of things that are critical? Propaganda ends where dialogue begins. And I'll tell you, a lot of people think there's a lot of propaganda going on inside of their organizations. It requires conversation. And then dialogue is the oxygen of change. Okay? I always get a chuckle out of people who say, what we need around here is more two-way communication. And I say, what the hell other kind is there? I say, well, you know, I mean, we send out our messages and our memos and we do our presentations and, oh, I said, okay, I get it. You're talking about message distribution. That's the best you can do? Okay. Don't confuse it with communication. Because I'm telling you, one-way communication is like one-handed clapping. Now, everybody join me. I want you to show me. Come on, I'm serious. Show me where one-handed clapping, what does that do? Makes you look like a bunch of fools. That's right. Same way with one-way communication. Get rid of this notion. The cascade is dropping one layer of information down, down, down until it winds up in a cesspool of information down here at the bottom. Nothing to do with it. Change it to this. This is a fountain. Information goes up, information goes down, up and down in a constant flow. That's the way to make sure that you've got truly interactive communication. Speed. There used to be a time when maybe a monthly magazine or newsletter might get things done. I'm telling you, it's got to go at the speed of light. How are we going to make sure people have the information they need like this, like this, like this, like this, like this, every minute in order to optimize performance? Availability of information is a policy question. What kind of decision are you going to make about the information you're going to share with employees? Now, people are getting more expansive about that. Mike's company finally decided, his CEO said, you know what? Here it is, 2-word policy, no secrets, period. Everything, completely open, except for confidential personnel files. But you can have a policy, but if you don't have a process to make sure that people have access to information, what good is it going to do you? You know, I dare you to find it. Relevance. Let's make sure that we know what really matters to employees. If we're going to be engaging in communication and conversation, let's find out what really matters to them in order to help them succeed in their jobs. Inclusion. Let's make sure we don't leave anybody out. Now, I like to think of an organization as a human body. If you decide you're not going to give information to the hand, a blood flow, let's say, it's the same thing as information, what's going to happen? It's going to wither and die. And what's going to happen to the arm? What's going to happen to the rest of the body? It's going to get sick and die. Let's make sure we don't leave people out. And then authenticity and transparency. When I first started in corporate communications at PET, I was relatively young, and the guy who was my boss, the senior VP, said, you know, if you really want to keep your job here, sanitize the bad news and glamorize the good news. Now, how authentic is that, right? I mean, seriously, how important is that? Look what happens when you really do have an environment, a communication culture, if you will, that really puts value on authenticity and transparency, right? Pretty obvious. This is one example. Again, this is from Mike's organization where he worked years ago. And this is a room where they had all of that kind of critical information about employee safety, about customer satisfaction, a variety of different kinds of things. But what was really masterful about this is how easy it was to process the data, because each person who was responsible for the various kinds of information also were in charge of putting these little red and green flags up. So that if there was a number that wasn't tracking with what it was supposed to be, red flag went up, everybody knew what was going on, and then the plan was already in place for how to deal with the number going down, because the worst time to figure out how to work on a crisis, to deal with a crisis, is when you're in the middle of the crisis. So I have a plan in place, everybody knew exactly what was going to happen, so within 24 to 48 hours, the problem was solved. Speed. I'm going to show you something here. It's a videotape, and again, I think it was Catherine who said earlier, take this more as illustration or inspiration instead of replication. We're going to show you something that is kind of a basic piece of the work that we do with organizations. It's called a huddle. There are different kinds of huddles, different kinds of approaches. This is one. It'll give you some idea of what we're talking about in terms of these various dimensions of communication. That, in fact, do lead to greater engagement, ownership, and alignment with the team.
Sales. We're going to leave the number at 2 million. but there is some upside potential to that.
We are ahead 60%. How did you know that? We are ahead 60%. Now, if that's not a hoot and holler for Mike Stivers, I don't know what is. Yeah, what's the absorption number?
260.
So that's a better or worse than last week?
5 better than last week, and we got a shot at another 5.
I think that deserves a round of applause. Look at these profit numbers. We got $784,000 profit that we've made before bonus. Total factory sales.
2116.
Thank you. What's the total variance number, Tim?
It is 58.
All right. Good job. I need manufacturing overhead spending number for production.
182.
Okay, standard COGS.
1576.
It's huge. There's a big honking number out there. Paul, how much have we spent on warranty so far this year?
Okay, paid out, $228,000 in warranty.
Okay, so $228,000 in warranty. You walk out of here tonight, that's your thing to think about is how can we reduce that cost? Okay, and here's the number that I've just been waiting for all week. Freight variances, inbound freight.
3 unfavorable.
And outbound freight?
10 favorable.
So we're holding this 10 favorable here for another week. Is that gonna hold up?
Depends on what sales do.
You wanna do
But
it?
yeah, it's going to hold up. It's going to hold up for the numbers that are on the board, but if they change, I'll change those.
And they'll get better, right?
Absolutely. Whatever you say, sir.
Wait, here's your shirt. You gotta hand this shirt out to this person too. I mean, this... So the bonus for the month accrual is how much?
91,000.
So how much we got in the bonus pool?
91,000.
Oh, is this like a hoot and holler? Yes, this is a hoot and holler. Okay, we're done.
Okay, what'd you see there? Just give me your reaction. Very interactive. Enthusiasm. Ownership. Were you at all, I mean, these were not managers giving these numbers. These were line workers. Just to understand those numbers, talk about being in on information and decisions. You remember that part? How critical that was? Look at every single one of these. Speed, instantaneous. Availability, everything's open. Access, right on the spot. Relevance, you bet your bippy. Inclusion, everyone. Authenticity and transparency could not have been more so. That isn't the only tool you can use, but it is important to think about these 7 characteristics of effective organizational communication when you're looking at why things aren't working and what things can be done in order to make them work from a communication standpoint. So the next thing we're going to talk about is continuous improvement. We have a model that we call the Imagine Action System that was actually, again, used originally at Wainwright, and we've used it with a number of clients, obviously, since then. It's really a middle out. You hear people talk about top down and bottom up. It's really middle out that really makes the biggest difference in an organization. It really equips the managers and supervisors with the tools and techniques for maximizing employee engagement. Again, a lot more details than what we're going to show you, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to give you a little quick rundown. So the traditional suggestion program, okay, if you want to compare it to that, is more of a one-off reactive kind of activity. You see something you want to fix, there may be some kind of incentive program, you just do it because there's a suggestion form sitting around. Our approach is really rooted in a continuous improvement habit with a huddle process like the one you just got done seeing. This is very important, what I'm about to say. I'm going to say it twice. You cannot get people to contribute to continuously improving the organization unless it becomes a habit. We are creatures of habit. We are creatures of habit. The word habit and process are synonymous. And like all habits and processes, there are good ones and there are bad ones. But one thing is true about all of them, they will never change unless you have another habit for breaking the habit of doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. critically important. People tend to look improvements here, there, everywhere. You know, give me your ideas from everything you can think about. What we're doing is getting people to focus on the everyday work processes that they understand, that they work on, they have control over. That doesn't mean you don't get input from people outside who might have a little bit of a different perspective. That can be helpful. But make sure that we're focusing on the things that we understand best and know that we can work on most effectively. A lengthy approval process, 2, 3, 4 months before we ever get any feedback on how this thing's actually going to be improved. This is a very rapid review and approval process, mainly by the supervisors, for about 80% of the ideas that get generated in these twice-a-week sessions, 10 to 20 minutes. Every employee, not all together, in their departments, in their work groups, in their teams, also relating up to what we'll call the enterprise-wide or the company-wide scoreboards that people are going to be following in order to make sure that the organization is achieving its ultimate results. Bigger is better with individual rewards tied to financial impact. That's the typical approach. Here we want people focusing on the small things they can understand and they can control. And if you've got any kind of a reward system, make sure you're not trying to give people more money for bigger ideas, because what's going to happen? They're all going to try and hit home runs when everybody knows that the teams that win the World Series will want to hit the most base hits. That's just the truth. Let's get people focusing on base hits. And then limited communication about the improvements when they're made. With this model, or with any model you would want to use, you want to make sure that improvements are documented and they're shared systematically for potential for replication. You may have a great idea in one part of the organization. If you've got a really good communication system, you can find 20 ways to replicate that idea. Instead of $100, it's going to save you $2,000, right? So these are the basic principles. This whole focus on small is critically important. In fact, it's so powerful that we love this quote by Helen Keller. I long to accomplish great and noble tasks, but it's my chief duty to accomplish humble tasks as though they were great and noble. The world has moved along not only by the mighty shoves of its heroes, but also by the aggregate of the tiny pushes of each honest worker. I mean, put that on your wall for a while. Put that on your wall for a while. That's worth putting on the wall. So I'm going to turn this over to Mike, who's going to spend about the next 25 minutes talking with you, and then we're going to open it up for some questions, and then we got just a few more kind of fun teaser slides at the end that we're going to show you that we think are going to resonate for you. Before I do that, how many of you are familiar with the Baldrige Award? You know what it is? Okay, it is the single most significant award you can get from the Department of Commerce for high performance. It used to be about quality. It's actually expanded beyond that. Since 1988, when it was instituted, there have been over 200,000 companies applied for the criteria that they can use in order to work with them. 1,600 have actually applied for the award, and only 99 companies since 1988 have won this award. Mike was the general manager when his company won that award. So you're talking to a guy who really knows his stuff. Mike Sims.
So we're going to shift to just telling a story with the lights coming up here hopefully shortly. And you're about to hear I wasn't an expert. You're about to hear what I hope you take away from the presentation, a real world story about culture change in the real world. And I want to make sure I had this right. So I wrote it down. That led to ultimately, after a lot of trial and tribulation, the Missouri Quality Award, the National Baldrige Award, the Best Plants in America Award, 95% overall customer satisfaction with the grading system where A was 100%, a B was 90%, a C was 50%, and a D was 0. If you had one customer that gave you 50%, you couldn't have that 95% score. 82% reduction on recordable accidents as employment doubled. Not a per head count accident rate, total number of accidents. 80% reduction in cost of quality. 52 improvements implemented per employee per year for 8 consecutive years in a voluntary system. I asked the group we talked to earlier this morning the question, if you knew for a fact the next 12 months that every employee, every hour, every day, for the next 12 months, every employee was aware of and took care of all the small things they had control over, what would it mean to your budget? Let me ask the question again. If every employee, every day, every hour, every moment was aware of and took care of all the small things they had control over the next 12 months, what would it mean to your budget? There's nothing bigger you can do but ultimately work with your employees on the things they got control over. That was the lesson slide a few slides ago. And here's one that's really important to what you've been hearing today throughout the sessions. There was absolutely unquestionable positive impact on the family lives of the people at Wainwright. To this very day, they talk about it when you meet and you talk to them. Unquestionably, when you truly have true culture change, it happens to the person, it goes home with those folks. Be looking for that ultimately as perhaps the highest level achievement that you can achieve with culture change. And lastly here, before I get into my personal story, there are 8,000 managers from around the country that came into Wainwright to hear a full day story of a 30-minute version you're about to hear here. But the reason why there are 8,000 managers that came in, people like Dana Corporation or Eaton Corporation or IBM, whoever, they bring a couple managers in. They'd hear the story that you're about to hear, and they bring them all back in over the next year. And the reason why is that the story you're about to hear is not a pretty story. It's a very difficult, humbling story that I love sharing these days. Let's put a slide up there that talks about middle out versus top down, middle out versus bottom up. Hopefully the next 20 minutes will give you a little more meat from a real world perspective as to what that really looks like. So, my story. My degree is in meteorology. I wanted to be a TV weatherman, and I still do. But at 23 years old, I became a supervisor at General Motors. Don't know why that happened, but it happened. I got laid off 2.5 years later when they cut the second shift. I hired on to a small, rapidly owned company in St. Louis area called Wainwright Industries. They were a supplier to the automotive industry. I started as a supervisor. I got promoted rapidly. Production manager, quality manager, sales manager, plant manager. And the reason that I got promoted so rapidly is I was the world's greatest yes person. How many of you have been a yes person or still are a yes person? Raise your hand for me. Back when those managers came to Wainwright, all 8,000 of them, they put their hands up pretty quickly. It's okay to be a yes person in the beginning of your career or a new company. You don't know that business. I needed to listen and learn from the owners that were training me at Wainwright. You need to be a yes person in order to learn as fast as you can. But at some point in every leader's career, no matter what the industry is, you reach a point where you know the details of what's going on in your department than your manager does, or that your owner does. And that's the point where we need to be able to step out and really become a leader and no longer the yes person, but it's extraordinarily hard to do. And I believe it's much harder to do today than it was back in the mid-90s because of what happened in 2008 and 2009. The story you're hearing from me, I believe, actually is more prevalent, even though it's more hidden than what it was back in the mid-90s. So the company grew rapidly. We were doubling, tripling in size. Things were going along great as I was getting promoted as the world's greatest yes person. It was really, really good. It felt really good for me. I felt powerful. Not in a negative way, but I felt powerful that I could make a difference, and I had made a difference, and it was good, and it was really good. 89 comes along. We're about to hit a recession pretty bad in the automotive industry at that point in time. And all those years, 9 years at Wainwright, where things had gone great, all of a sudden things began to fall apart. And I had no idea what was wrong. I had no idea what to do about it. And I kept working harder at doing the things that I did for the previous 9 years. And things kept getting worse, not better. And what happened to me at that point in time has happened to many middle managers in this country. I began to develop on the job a very, very negative attitude. Have you ever got negative attitude? Raise your hand for me. Do you have one today? Raise your hand for me. My negative attitude lasted for 2 years. And when you get a negative attitude, some of you probably can relate to this. You can't sleep when you go home at night. You carry it home on the weekends. You carry it home to the families. I didn't know what the problem was at the time. My relationship with the owners was getting very bad. And so what did I do? I didn't know what else to do. I was doing the same thing that got me ahead of being the yes person. I started blaming the owners. The owners are at fault. They're the problem. And then I actually went out and did probably the single most destructive thing that I could have done. I didn't know what the answer was. I thought they were the problem. So I went out to start reading the business books back in those days. And every single business book that I read said this, or this is my interpretation, it said this. Mike Sims, middle manager, for change to happen in your company, it has to be top-down change. Mike Sims, middle manager, until Don Wainwright, CEO, changes, you have no chance to make a change or difference in your company. The books didn't say that specifically, but there was a high-level theme to the books that said, it's got to be the top, it's got to be the top. For 2 years, I wanted to quit every night. Twice, the owners hired my replacement as plant manager and wanted me to stay around 3 months until I trained them. I'm lucky to be here because both those plant managers quit within 3 months of starting. And so I still had this negative attitude. I was thinking about the book's top-down change. I actually developed this visual when I couldn't sleep at night as to what it would look like when the books were right and top-down change happened. And what it would look like when Don Wainwright, CEO, changed. And honestly, truly, this is what I envisioned. I'd get to work at 7 a.m. one morning. Don would call me into his office at 8 o'clock that morning. I'd walk in his office and Don would say to me, Mike, I have finally seen the burning bush. I know I'm the problem. I gotta get out of your way. Mike Sims, plant manager, here's the keys to the bus. Go do it, let me know how I can help you. I really believe that. I'm not making it up. To this very day, Don Wainwright has yet to see a burning bush. It is not how the business world works. It is not a top-down change model. So I didn't get fired. I didn't quit, but the owners helped save me. They didn't know what that problem was either. And so their answer was, let's go out and benchmark best-in-class companies, people who have done things and reached the top of best-in-class. And they were Baldrige Award winners that we began to benchmark. I hated to go listen to good companies because of how bad I thought our company was. But a couple times a year, we had to go out and listen to Baldrige Award-winning companies. And the moment that the story big changes here was the first session that we had to go to the Ritz-Carlton in St. Louis, Missouri to listen to IBM Rochester, who had just won the Baldrige Award. And we took myself, the 3 owners, and 4 of the managers, 8 people, a full table. I made sure I got to that benchmarking session at the Ritz-Carlton that morning first for my company. Why? I wanted to pick the table on the very back of the room as far as I could get. So I picked the last table so I couldn't be hearing the speakers. That's how negative I was. And as 8 of us were sitting in the back of the room, listening to the vice president of IBM talk about the reasons why they won the Baldrige Award, there was a slide that came up. You've seen it here already, a couple times today. The slide said, simply, sincere trust and belief in people. 1989, 1990, 91, IBM Rochester. That's how they had won the Baldrige Award. Their key fundamental foundation. I was in the back of the Ritz-Carlton. I looked at those words, and the first thing that hit me was, what is that? So I wrote the words, sincere trust and belief in people, down on my Ritz-Carlton coffee cup napkin, and I gave it to our controller sitting next to me. She wrote back on the napkin, I don't know what trust is, do we have it at Wainwright? I wrote back on the napkin, if we don't know what sincere trust and belief in people is, we can't possibly have it in our company. The owner saw that napkin. Somehow that day was the catalyst for the rest of the story, but it didn't happen overnight. One other event took place 6 months later. We got to go and listen to Milliken and Company, who had just had won the Baldrige Award. And I really still wasn't paying much attention, but there was one slide up there I'll never ever forget. And this, in combining sincere trust and belief, and this next slide I'm going to share with you, that's what got me moving down the right path, even though it still took me a few months to get there, a few years to get there. One slide didn't say much on it. It was a picture of an ocean and a bunch of clouds, so being a meteorologist, I like that slide. But it had a whole bunch of raindrops falling from these dark clouds on the ocean. And they were talking about employee engagement. And the top of that slide simply said, it takes 1,000 raindrops to fill the ocean. It takes 1,000 raindrops to fill the ocean. And ultimately, I was connecting people, what they had control over, their processes, and this ultimately, this resulting, the value of small. The value of small, the one thing that every person, whether they're at home or at work, has control over. So after those two events, I was changing. But I was about to make the single biggest mistake of my career, even though I was getting it. So I took this sincere trust and belief seriously. I said, I want to go do that. I'm not sure what it is, but I want to go do it. And I secondly said, I want to do it around working with the employees around the 1,000 raindrops. So actually, without those two benchmark sessions, I wouldn't be talking. But those were two things that galvanized me to start moving in a different direction as a leader. And I really began to do a pretty darn good job going out there trusting and working and listening to the employees' ideas. And that was really good. But at the same time I was doing that, I was using a baseball bat on my supervisor reported to me. I did not trust them. I didn't have that understanding just yet. As I was trusting the employees, I was bashing the rest of the middle management team. And I got so upset with them because they did not understand trust yet. So again, this top-down, bottom-up, or is it really middle-out change? My supervisors and middle managers, they didn't quite understand what trust was because we hadn't practiced it yet. And so I got so upset with them, not helping me work with the employees, that I created a pretty radical measurement system for the time. I created the process where I want your employees to give you feedback and tell you personally as their supervisor what they think about you with the grading system. It was the same scorecard we used for our customer. And I said if it's good enough for our customer, it's good enough for our employees to grade their supervisors. So every quarter, for about 4 or 5 quarters, every supervisor and manager went through that process getting feedback from their direct reports. And unbelievably, 3 to 4 sessions in, it was working wonders. They actually were building more trust with their employees. They were changing as supervisors because of the feedback that they saw. And the reflection that you get from your direct reports is a pretty darn valuable message to get. And it was working so well that the owners came to me one day and said, Mike, you know that process where you have the employees giving the supervisor their feedback? I said, yeah. They go, that's really working good, Mike. But we keep hearing from your managers that you're the problem. So we want your managers to give you feedback and see where that takes you. And I said, sure, no problem, I'll do that. So we're at least halfway down the path of this culture change. It was yet to be sustainable unless this happened. And so let me read to you a subset of the 30 pages of feedback I got from 15 managers. It wasn't a pretty story, I told you that when I started. Mike needs to watch his action with a group of people. You can tell what he likes and dislikes the way he carries on the conversation. The only time Mike communicates is of a negative nature. Mike does not allow an individual to finish a thought without being constantly interrupted. Mike often does not practice what he preaches with regard to finger pointing, i.e. going on headhunts. Mike tends to waffle on the quality issues. Choose a stance and stay with it. Our HR manager wrote, the confrontational tone that Mike often sets when he begins a conversation as a promote good communication. Mike has antagonized many people, including me, when using this approach. I believe Mike could make his point and achieve better results if he softened his questioning, parentheses, badgering technique. Mike needs to talk to people, not at them. Mike needs to improve his listening skills. My number one fault was this. But this fault was one where I thought I was helping. And how dumb I was thinking I was helping. Mike needs to stop putting people on the spot during meetings or any place else for that matter. I took advantage of the meetings to hammer my supervisors, my managers. Our quality manager wrote, Mike is manipulative, antagonistic, and always reminding you that he doesn't care to hear what you have to say, like always interrupting the dialogue. So there's about 30 pages of this, but I'm going to end it with one comment that absolutely proves to anybody who hears this that I was the world's greatest yes person. Our design manager wrote, Mike gets great support until backed into a corner, then he will jump out the window and leave you standing there alone. So, guess what I did when I first got this feedback? No, not yet. I said, just what I expected. I had to hammer them hard. I know they didn't like it, but what I was doing was the right thing for their employees. So remember now, my connection of what I was doing to them was to get to their employees. I had developed a passion around trust and empowering the employee without ever understanding what middle out change really is. 2 weeks later, I was at home on a Saturday. I just happened to pull these out of my briefcase at the time, which we had back in those days. And I reread these comments, and only then did I say to myself, this can't be good. This can't be a good thing for the company and the business. I came back in the next week with all the managers, called a meeting, and I shared with them, this can't be good. And I was going to become a different manager for it, and I did. And just let me share real quickly here. Here's the comments that I got a year later, after I went back and shared with them that I was going to be working on. Now, what happened here is I completely saw the connection. If I don't go through the supervisors and the team leads and the department managers, you can't change the culture. It doesn't matter how strong the CEO is. If we don't develop and empower and support the people who are closest to the frontline workers, culture change can't occur and can't be sustained. Our HR manager sounds a lot better. Mike is always supportive, is what she says a year later. However, she says, the approach he uses does sometimes cause a breakdown in communication. The good of the many is Mike's main concern, which is great. But he can make you feel like he's the only one who knows what's best for the good of the many. Mike has helped many of us grow in our professions. Perhaps now he can step back and enjoy his parenting and accomplishments. We still need you, Mike, but let us come to you, and you can begin to see at that point in time, there was an incredible shift in the culture by doing what? Supporting and empowering the middle management team, who are the people every single hour of the day that are the face of the organization. There's a lot more to the story, but I'm going to go back to the 8,000 managers that came from around the country to hear that story. So when an HR manager or a VP of operations brought a couple managers in to benchmark Wainwright, what they saw and what they heard, because they told me too many times, not to back it up here, that they wanted their managers to hear my story, because even though I got feedback that sounds really, really bad, and it was, many managers will get that same kind of feedback if they they had that process done. So what they were doing, they were bringing their managers in to hear my story because of how average I was, how predictable I was, and how most of their managers were actually in the same boat, and they wanted them to come in and hear that story for that reason. I was a typical, traditional, yes person manager, and I'm lucky to be here to be able to say I did make it through it. Had it not been for that feedback process, I wouldn't have made it. And I was lucky to have gone through those 2 years where they hired my replacement twice. So that's back to
Think back to some of the other things that we mentioned at the very beginning. Remember that guy was scrunching, the command and control, the micromanagement. It's so hard to get away from that because we're so afraid of losing control. Instead of really engaging in sincere trust and belief in people, understanding this incredible drive that people have to exercise imagination and free will, to have control over their lives, and then to be able to create, this is the key, systematic processes and systems in those 5 areas of measurement, reward and recognition, communication, learning and development, continuous improvement. If you don't make those systemic and systematic, you will not sustain employee engagement in a way that's going to have you continue to differentiate yourself from the marketplace and be able to succeed. As I've told people before, in my lifetime, I've said only a handful of memorable things. This is one that I feel real strongly about. You are going to have problems, just like we just got done here in Mike. You're going to have problems. And the key is, how are you going to approach people? Are you going to approach them as the cause of the problem or the source of the solution? What happens when you approach people as the cause of the problem? They get defensive. Anybody here ever performed at their best when they're feeling defensive? The other thing that you get when you do approach people as the source of the solution is that they have a positive place to own their responsibility and accountability for making it right. If you go at them as the cause of the problem, they're just going to get defensive, they're not going to own it. I mean, we've got to understand where people are coming from. People really, really do want to do a good job. We got to have the right values and vision. We got to have the right management behaviors. We have the right systems and policies and processes, the right mindset, the right heart set, the right systems and policies and processes to reinforce those principles that we believe in. And when you do that, you can get people to do incredible things. I mean, incredible. Look at this. Now, let me tell you, is that a friend or what? Is that teamwork or what? And let me tell you, if you do this stuff, no kidding, people will get on their hands and their knees in a toilet for you. I'm not kidding. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna ask every one of you to stand up because you are going to become certified champions of trust. Right here at this moment. And if you're so inclined, you can put your right hand over your heart. If you don't like to do that kind of thing, that's fine. But here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask you all to read this with me, okay? I solemnly swear I will champion the cause of trust within my organization at all times. I will encourage everyone to pass every decision through the filter of trust before any action is taken. I will always deal with people as the source of the solution, not the cause of the problem. And I will honor and nurture the unique qualities of imagination and free will that exist within every human being. If you look on our website, we have a phrase that says, we're about creating great organizations where people love to work and customers love doing business. I promise you, if you do this, if you live by this, you'll have that kind of organization. Thank you. What questions do you have?
What if the leadership team doesn't trust?
Yeah.
What if, I mean, what if it's above here and they don't trust? I'm not, I
Yeah.
know I can deal with it.
Yeah.
I get all of that. But what if you don't know it every time?
Okay. You want to take that one on?
Say it again. I was trying to,
No, 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 no.
so what if,
The senior level of management doesn't have the trust with the other employees? What if they don't believe it, and they just think he's the yes man, and they're,
what happened at Wainwright, I chose to go a different direction that was driving the numbers of the business better than what the other approach was. And when the CEO saw it, he said, keep going, Mike. So there has to be, and this is where the problem comes into play, if you have a yes person group of people below the CEO, that there's no one person that's going to be able to step out and go lead the cause, because ultimately, if you believe the story we just shared of what happened in the real world, it's not going to be the CEO driving the culture anyway. They can stop it and get in the way of it, but they're not going to be the drivers of it. So ultimately, in fact, you got different cultures in your company now based upon who the supervisor is. You know that, you feel it, you know where to go. So ultimately, what we want to be talking about, how do we get the right leader at the right position to begin to catalyze this and go down that path?
I'm going to give you one quick response. Mike said middle out. You've got to have people in the middle who are willing to take a chance.
And they're there. They are absolutely
They are
there.
You've got to you just simply have to have the courage. Now, most senior executives are sort of starting to get it. And you remember those numbers I showed you before, the meta-analysis? I'm telling you, if you show that data to anybody, I mean, if he's got a lick of sense or she's got a lick of sense and they've got a pulse, they've got to be excited about those numbers.
Can you pull up mission control on the slide?
Which one?
Wainwright mission control room. Can you go back to that
Oh,
slide?
yeah.
So as I was changing and wanting to try and learning the hard way, we created this room to keep the owners saying, yeah, keep going. So, and the owners can't create this room anyway, from an operational perspective. It ultimately is the middle management team that has the information, the data. So the actual existence of mission control where we began to really aggressively track the improvements, the employees who are now trusted and empowered, and by the way, trained. One of the most dramatic changes at Wainwright in the culture shift is we went from pretty much no training to, at one point, 7% of payroll in 1 year. 7% of payroll in 1 year of training. And you know what? It's going to happen to you if you really absolutely say, we're going to go trust our people, we're going to make it happen. If you don't enhance your training budget, you're not going to be following through on what your desires are. Training and development has to come along with trust. More so these days than the workforce that was in place 20 years ago. There's more need for training on the front end. So all I'm saying is here, it's not about being soft in culture that you're going to take to the top. It's about the middle management team changing and moving the culture that's driving the numbers to a higher level. And whenever you do that, the top falls right in line. And if you visually display it, Don Wainwright ended up saying the reason why I let Mike keep going driving the bus, there's those red flags. I could walk in each morning and see where the red flag was at, and I knew where the problems were at. And so the owners actually were able to support and promote the new culture or the culture shift, even though they really weren't embedded in the culture, because the top really is never embedded, if you will, inside the culture. Does that make sense? And ideally you'd take the middle management team together with more power and less risk for one person making that change happen.
Mike, I think this question ties into that. Did you ever have middle managers that didn't play well with each other on the middle management team, and how did you deal with that?
Well, yes, but half of the reason they did was because of how I was treating them. And so I caused friction among themselves, so I was half the problem. The other half of the problem was we didn't have the common goals for the supervisors or the middle managers. And so the very nature of the measurement system ultimately creates the aligning factor for trust to live in. It's that open and honest communication about the real data.
Questions, comments, anything else? Yes, ma'am.
Mike, thank you for sharing your story. My question is around what are some of the other elements that were key factors to you achieving the Baldrige Award? You mentioned frontline managers, you mentioned training. Can you share some of the other influences in your culture shift?
Well, ultimately, Mission Control, the reason why this was called Mission Control at Wainwright is we took a look at the growing culture, what it was looking like and what we wanted, and we said, what a great image of NASA's Mission Control Room. You look in there, you got 100 different people on different computers running different jobs, critical jobs. But is there any question that every one of those people in Mission Control at NASA are 100% focused on one goal, the safety of that launch? So what a great visual aid. And so ultimately it was bringing the data and the information from Mission Control and that actually drove everything. So it was business results that allowed us to keep going. And so it was the numbers and our incredible focus on continuous improvement that was making the numbers better. And again, reflecting back to that 52 improvements per employee per year and the impact that has on, continuously building month to month to month. So ultimately what happened at Wainwright on the culture shift was not soft. It was systems, absolutely systems driven. It was the right thing for the owners to see and buy into it. It was the right thing for the employees to rally around. So it was the core systems around continuous improvement, customer satisfaction, and ultimately profitability that caused it to happen. Without that structure, hopefully I'm answering your question here, without that system structure, you can't change a culture.
And getting rid of the baseball bat.
All right, Mike and Les, thank you very much. This session, there's a little bit of a break, and then a session again in about 15 minutes.
Let me mention one quick thing if you're interested. Forgot to mention this, but at the very end, there's actually a slide that says, we know this is sort of like getting a lecture with a fire hose. If anybody wants to get kind of like a personalized one-on-one thing, we're happy to do it. There's actually a sheet of paper back there you can grab. We're happy to do a 1-hour free coaching session. There's also something over there about the cultural assessment tool as part of our leadership guidance and alignment process. And if anybody's interested, there's some books back there if you want me to sign one for you. Okay, thank you.